Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We're continuing the top 100 board games of all time lists with numbers 40 through 31, the 2023 edition. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Let's talk about the best board games of all time. Starting this section of the list off with number 40 is Ascension Tactics, the miniatures deck building game. This is brand new to the list and has you playing as commanders of a team of champions. You'll use your champions and send them out to complete different objectives based on your scenario goals. You have two different forms of currency, one for buying new cards into your deck, as well as one for actually commanding your units. You'll be able to use them, send them out onto the board, attack other players, as well as use their special abilities. Now, my favorite part about this game, though, are the champions themselves. Every single time you play, you're going to be able to draft these champions at the start in order to assemble a team that's going to fulfill those objectives that the scenario has set up for you. For example, you have the Runic Lycanthrope here, who has a pretty small command cost, so he's going to be one you're going to be able to summon and use a lot. They have an attack stat, defense stat, and then forms of effects in their main body here. For example, the Allegiance tag says that if you play a card of a specific color, then you get to use the effect of that as well. So that will guide your deck building. So you can assemble a team that has all of these allegiances that do different things, or try to build these different effects that are unique and integral to winning that scenario. For example, you have some characters that get effects when they defeat units. You have some characters that are going to get effects that are outside the box. There's one character in particular, the Nihil Bomber, where he can blow himself up, which is a strategy that you may or not want to engage with based on whatever you're trying to accomplish with the rest of your team. I love the planning that goes into this and that draft at the beginning and then employing that strategy. So that is my number 40, Ascension Tactics, the miniatures deck building game. My number 39 goes to Hanamikoji. Number 42 last year, this is a lane battling game for 2 players. In this game, we're going to be using an I split you choose mechanism in order to play different cards out onto the board and then using those cards to gain control of the geisha. If you control the majority of geisha or reach a certain number of points, you win right then and there. Otherwise, you continue the game, playing as many rounds as it takes until that victory condition is established. Now, my favorite part about this game, though, is the way you're going to be playing your cards, and that's through the token action system. You'll have these 4 tokens that you must use during each round of the game, and after you use all 4, that's when you compare your total values and see who wins the favor of geishas. One of these is just going to outright take a card, put it face down, and that will get played on your side at the end, face up. So this is a hidden card, and it's the only card that you yourself actually get to pick to play. The other one here allows you to just discard 2 cards from your hand face down secretly. And then the last 2 are the I split you choose mechanism, where one is going to allow you to present 3 different cards. Your opponent chooses one that they keep and you get the other 2. And then the other has you making 2 piles. The timing of using these actions is integral to your success. And I love the way that you're drawing cards every single round to build up your hand. And based on when you use these actions, it's going to dwindle your options for your future turns. For example, if I decide to use the 2 piles card right away, it's going to take 4 cards out of my hand, so when I'm using the rest of my actions, I have less options to choose from. But if I decide to save it, I'm forced to use the 4 cards I have left in my hand for that final action. It's got a great arc to it, and I love the back and forth nature of this, and the tiebreaker system with the favor tokens. That's my number 39, Hanamikoji. My number 38 goes to When I Dream. Number 78 last year, this is a party-style game where you're trying to give misinformation to a dreamer who's blindfolded and trying to guess words. You have one team who's going to be the boogeymen, and they're trying to make sure that dreamer says the wrong word. Then you have another team that's the fairies, who are trying to make them guess the correct word. And then you have this Sandman, who's a strange character in between, trying to get an equal number of good and bad words. So as these specific characters who are influencing the dreamer, you're trying to make them guess one way or another. But if you are the dreamer, you're just trying to guess as many as possible and figure out who's actually telling you the correct information, because you get points for the ones you get correct. My favorite thing about this game, though, is the way you're constantly switching roles. For example, you may be the boogeyman in the first round, but once that dreamer finishes, you'll shuffle all the rolls up and get redealt, and you could be the boogeyman again, or you could become the fairy or the Sandman. I love how you're having to readjust and act on the fly, as well as find your teammates and try to come up with this non-verbal strategy to make sure you're guiding the dreamer into the correct paths. You can use your words, try to combo them and make sure you're leading them down a specific pathway, or you can just try to give your own strong, solid clues. It's up to how you want to play in that moment, and it's super tactical as you're having to think of those strategies on the fly. So that is my number 38, When I Dream. My number 37, number 14 last year, is Keyflower. This is a worker placement game that's mixed with auctioning, as every single round you're going to be deciding whether or not you want to use your characters to auction for tiles, to add them to your own city, or to activate the tiles that already exist on the board. You'll also be able to bid for turn orders, special abilities, and you'll make this gigantic town in front of you based on all of these tiles that you've been winning. But my favorite part about this game is the way that every single option is present at all times, and it's terrifying because you have this huge amount of choice, but everything is something you want to do. And I love this sensation in games in general, when every action is excellent, but your prioritization and the order in which you take them is going to make all the difference. You have the choices between auctioning for the tiles, and it's got this great system where you put them around the tiles to do so. You have every single action available on each tile, including the ones that are being auctioned or the ones in your opponent's cities. But if you give them your meeples, then they get to use them next round, but maybe you really need the resource right now that's on their tiles, and so you send them out to go do that, or you try to use your own tiles, because that's going to recur your own characters for future rounds, and also ensure that the color is locked in for specific actions, because once a meeple's put on something, then that color is the only thing that can be used for that auction or that action. It's an awesome, stressful, but positive stressful choice, where you're always thinking about what things you can do and what things you should do. So that is my number 37, Keyflower. My number 36, number 37 last year, is Barrage. This has you playing as hydroelectric power plant owners as you're constructing buildings in order to siphon this water and use it to generate electricity. You'll use that electricity to fulfill contracts, and at the start of each round you get a grip of workers that you'll send out as groups to take actions on a main game board or on your own personal board to start spinning this construction wheel to build different buildings onto these mountains. Everybody's going to be running into each other as the buildings are all in this same area, but you'll be trying to make sure you're manipulating the water in a way that you end up on top through generating the most power. Now, my favorite part about this game is the interaction amongst the players through the different buildings that they're placing, and the neutral buildings that start on the board. You'll have these different dams that you'll be able to build and construct that will actually collect the water, but only if you have the conduits are you allowed to use that water. You use the water, you pay the cost for it, and then the water is going to move up to one of these power plants, and then the water will come out of there. You never actually spend the water, it's just running through turbines, so it consistently moves from different pool to pool. And so having one dam in one place is integral to the success of the different buildings that are all around it, and one piece of water can move around the entire map. I love the relationship that develops between the different players and how important the placement is throughout the entire experience. So that's my number 36, Barrage. My number 35, number 44 last year, is War Chest. This is an abstract 2-player or 4-player game where you're going to be assembling your team of units based on these drafted or randomly selected power cards, and with those units bag building by putting their tokens into your own personal chip bag. Every round you'll draw a hand of these chips and either deploy them onto the board, discard them from your hand to activate already deployed versions of that character, or put them face down to claim initiative or recruit new units from your bag. You'll be moving your characters to control different points on the main game board, and whoever is able to deploy all their control markers wins the entire game. My favorite part about this game, aside from the special powers and the intuitive gameplay, is the way that there is not perfect information in this abstract experience. It's everything that I wanted in an abstract game, and it does a great job at removing the analysis paralysis that a lot of these games can have. Now, in War Chest, you're drawing a hand of 3 tokens from your bag, and you don't know what these tokens are, but your opponent doesn't either, which gives the ability for you and your opponent to make reads, to make risky maneuvers, and push yourself into something that you could usually overanalyze. I love that there's no absolute certainty to your moves, and it's all about timing and risk and making critical gameplay moments in order to take advantage of the board state. So that's my number 35, War Chest. My number 34, number 57 last year, is Codenames Duet. This is a word game where you and your partner are going to be giving clues in order to place these tokens in a central board. Once you've placed all of these green tokens on the board, you win, but you only have a certain number of turns to do so. So in order to actually place these tokens, you're going to to have to string these different clues together. For example, say that my clue is banana, dress, and submarine. I might use the clue yellow and say 3, and that would try to get you to hopefully place your different clues on there. I don't know if that's actually a good clue, but we're going to roll with it. But my favorite part about this game is the way that you're making relationships with that person at the table, and you're both playing at the same time and having to adapt your strategy to what's happening on the game board. Some of your different tokens are going to overlap, and as you start giving clues, you'll have to think about what your opponent's coming from. And this isn't your opponent, I'm sorry, this is a cooperative game. So this person is somebody you're working together with. And so you're having to think in their head. One of my favorite ways to play this is with my wife. It's my favorite way to play this, actually. And we sit there and we think, and after we make the clues and the connections, we talk about what we were coming from. And it helps me understand the relationships that she's able to draw to these different things. And it's an experience that I'm always excited to come back to you. Now, this is something I need to let you know. I'm terrible at this game. It's been like 3 or 4 years since we've won a game of it, but the fact it's so engaging and makes me want to try again means that it needs to be on this list and needs to be this high. So that is my number 34. That is Codenames Duet. My number 33, number 9 last year, is Biblios, a filler game where you play as monks in monasteries trying to gain control of them by having the most of a specific color of card. At the end of the game, whoever's the most of each color gains that die, most points wins. As you play the game, you'll be playing in 2 distinct halves. In the first half, you'll be drafting, revealing cards from the top of the deck, and deciding whether you want to keep them, put them in an auction pile, or give them to the other players. The one that you keep is hidden, as well as the auction pile is hidden, but everything else is face up, so you can get an idea of what your opponents are going to be collecting. Once you've made these choices, though, you are committed to that choice, as once you keep one, you cannot keep one of those ones that comes out right afterwards. So it's a great push your luck system that's put into the drafting. After you've collected, you'll move on to the auction portion, and this is actually my favorite part of the experience. And when you play the auction half, you're going to be deciding whether or not you want to use your money to collect more of these colored cards to win those dice, or if a money card comes out, you have to decide if you want to use these cards, just any card, to get the money. And that choice is critical, because if a cash comes out, you need the cash to get the monasteries, but how much are you willing to get rid of? Maybe you have a bunch of blues in your hand, and you think that you can probably win the blue with just a couple of them. Maybe everybody at the table thinks you have a bunch of blues in your hand, but you really don't, and you're able to get rid of these, siphon these cards out in order to pick up more cash to push you into winning multiple other scoring cards. There's also cards that can manipulate the value, so determining how much those are worth is a huge deal. There's a lot of mind games that come into here, and overall the experience is rewarding as you make that final reveal based on this entire buildup of the drafting as well as the auction system. So that is my number 33, that is Biblios. My number 32, number 13 last year, is Glory to Rome. This has you building up Rome through the use of action cards and a follow system. Every single round you'll use one of the cards in your hand to take one of these 6 actions, or you'll decide to think, which just means you get to draw a bunch of cards. If somebody does take an action though, everybody else at the table has the option to follow by discarding a card of the same type. Or they can think, which means they get to draw a bunch of cards. So the action system always has you doing something, whether it be taking a specific action or drawing a bunch of cards to increase your options. You can hire more of these clients, which will allow you to copy actions, getting additional bonuses whenever somebody does a specific type, or you'll be able to start building buildings, which are going to give you special powers, as well as increase your point threshold and push towards that end of the game. And my favorite part about this game, though, is that action system. It's so gratifying on your turn to know that you're going to be doing something and doing something impactful. Either you get to choose exactly what you want when it comes to the actions you're playing, you can even get these jacks that will be used as wilds, or you can think and just draw a grip of cards. So it feels great to dump your hand and use all your resources when you're going to be rewarded for it with that think action. And there's a great comboing system when an opponent does an action where if you have a clientele, a craftsman, a laborer as example here, if your opponent plays a laborer, you can decide to think for your follow, and then if you have any clientele, you still get to perform that action with whatever clientele you have that matches. It's so much fun to just consistently be rewarded for playing this experience and then putting out these special buildings and powers and trying to win yourself while managing the rest of your opponent's crazy combos. So that is my number 32, Glory to Rome. Closing off this portion of the list, my number 31, number 33 last year, is Race for the Galaxy. This is a card-based game where you're going to be building up a tableau of planets and technologies as you're racing for the most points points. You can do this through just the core points on your cards or through a shipping system where your planets can produce goods. You can trade in those goods for victory points or more cards to help you build more things. Now, this game is driven through a phase action system where every single round you'll pick one of these cards, reveal it, and then resolve that action, but everybody at the table gets to resolve that action, but if you played it, you get the bonus. I love the way that you're able to choose and try to predict what the different players are doing and how that's going to incorporate into your strategy, and if you play the two-player version, you get to pick 2 cards every single time. I love the choice and being able to dictate your plans and hoping you're able to read and get additional bonus actions and value from whatever your opponents are also setting you up for. My favorite part about this game, though, are the cards themselves. There's this uniform iconography that allows you to look at a card and understand what's going on at a glance. For example, this card here is a planet because it's a circle. It produces a specific color of goods, brown. It's worth 0 victory points, and it has an effect that triggers during the sell action during this phase 4 here. I like how you can just get a quick glance based on this little chart here, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and understand what sort of impact this card is going to have on you. In addition, there are clarifications for cards that have effects that aren't as generic, and I love that they put them in this main area of the card while not completely obstructing the art on the cards either. It allows the game to have a wide variety of different effects without having to follow a specific pattern over and over and over again. One of my favorite things to do in Race for the Galaxy is find one card in your initial hand that you want to play and try to make it work, and try to find different cards and combos that'll help facilitate the use of that specific goal. So that's my number 31. That is Race for the Galaxy. So that's this portion of the list, numbers 40 to 31. Let's quickly go into a reflection piece where we'll talk about the new games as well as the biggest movers and changers overall. Now, starting off with the new games, we have Ascension Tactics, the miniatures deck building game. This one here I love as the 2-player skirmish experience. It's my favorite way to play this one. The scenario design is the most interesting at that player count, and it's what I find myself gravitating to most. There's this clever deck building system with ambush effects that make immediate effects, or the engine building through the use of going through that deck multiple times and using these powerful cards. And then overall, the experience and the arc of the game is just a lot of fun. Like I mentioned before, the drafting is something that's going to keep you coming back because each experience is dictated by your combination of your heroes, the scenario, as well as the cards that come out that you build your deck with. So love that this one's on the list, especially this high. That's Ascension Tactics, the deck building miniatures game. We have 3 major drops here, with Keyflower going from 14 to 37. Now, Keyflower, I think, went down because I dropped it from that 10 rating to a 9 rating. The difference is pretty small here, with a 10 meaning that it's a game that I always want to play, and I don't ever see that changing, with a 9 being a game I always want to play. So it's a very small difference, but it does mean that it's going to drop pretty high in that rankings here. Similar to that, Biblios also dropped from 9 to 33, so this is the biggest drop, but Biblios has dropped also from that 10 for a very similar reason. In addition, I think that this one dropped is there has been a couple experiences, and something that I found that's a little bit recurring when people play this for the first time, where the experience tends to be a little bit the same while they're learning the rules, where they focus and hone in on just one single die. It's still a great experience as I'm trying to do this whole manipulation, and that's a factor to think about, but it does make those gameplays feel a little bit similar, and that's something to be aware of when you're just learning the experience. And the last drop was for Glory to Rome. That was going from 13 all the way to 32, and this has to do with my playing of Race for the Galaxy, actually. The more that I play Race for the Galaxy and Glory to the Rome, they're so similar in what they're offering, but Race for the Galaxy just has a little bit of the edge, so that means that I had to make sure that these were similar in their ranking. Now, the reason that I prefer Race for the Galaxy is because of those cards. In Race for the Galaxy, which did have a jump from 33 to 31, the cards are unique, interesting, and you're always playing more of these cards. You're always getting new abilities in Race for the Galaxy. It's something you're constantly building towards and constantly being able to do, whereas in Glory to Rome, the cards are not as frequent with the building of them. When you get a building, you start working on it, it takes several turns before you're actually able to construct it, and then you get its power, and then you're able to do something. So the gameplay is a little bit longer when it comes to getting new powers and effects, but I do still love Glory to Rome and the sensation of just always doing something great on your turn. But those powers, abilities, and the variability that comes from it, from Race for the Galaxy, has pushed that to the top, which in conversely had just pushed Glory to Rome down. And our last big movie here, going from 78 to 38, is When I Dream. Now, this is one that I consistently have a great time with when it comes out, and it's one that I think needs to get more attention by others. It's a party game where you definitely have to perform, and I think that's going to prevent it from being some people's favorite, but when you're in this experience, you are invested. I love the little teams that you can make with this and the way that the party game works, and how different being on these different sides feels during the experience. It's one that's going to get you talking about afterwards, and it's going to stick in your mind for a long while. So that is When I Dream. And that's it. That's what we'll wrap up the video for today. Those were numbers 40 through 31. What did you think of this section of the list? I'm curious to hear what your personal 40 through 31 are, and just in general what you thought of the games that I put on here. Any surprises, any games that you're excited to see that haven't been mentioned yet? I'm curious to hear what you think. But thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.